Episode 1. The confessional was never meant to be locked. They say every sin confessed is a door closed in hell. But what if a sin was so monstrous, so unnatural, that even hell never built a door for it? I first heard his name whispered in the chapel ruins of St. Auriel's father Enoch. They said he never aged, never slept, and never left the church grounds after sundown. They said the confessional in the eastern chapel was nailed shut from the inside, and that no carpenter remembered sealing it. The first time I walked into St. Auriel's, I felt something watching me through the cracks in the stone. Not just a presence, but a memory, something old, arid, and furious. I came not as a pilgrim, but as a documentarian sent to investigate the rumors surrounding this forgotten rural parish. But the moment I stepped foot onto the cold, moss-wrapped tiles, I knew I wasn't here to film a legend. I was walking into one. The main chapel was untouched by time, yet stank of ancient grief. Crucifixes hung upside down, candles lit themselves, and in the far corner, where the altar used to be, was a wooden booth, rotting, chained, screwed shut with rusted nails that looked more like they were grown from the wood than hammered in. A priest Father Calder greeted me with a voice so hollow, it felt like it came from inside my chest. He claimed to be the current keeper of St. Auriel's, but never said the word priest. "What's in the confessional?" I asked. "Camera ready?" He looked toward it, not at it, toward it, as if looking directly would betray his tone. "It's not what's in there," he said. "It's what still listens from behind the wood." He told me Father Enoch took a confession 42 years ago from a child who walked in barefoot, bleeding, claiming to have spoken to an angel with black eyes. The boy whispered something to Enoch, and the priest screamed so violently he bit off a piece of his own tongue. That same night, Enoch sealed the booth, burned every record of the parish, and never let another soul inside. But he never left the church again either. The Vatican came, investigators came, psychiatrists came, but the confessional stayed shut. Enoch refused to speak, and over time, the sin that had been confessed, whatever it was, became something no one dared remember. But as I filmed that night, I noticed something on the footage. Inside the confessional booths, past the tiny slits in the wood, a silhouette moved. Not human, not shaped like anything that should speak. And then I heard it, a whisper. "He forgave me, but God didn't." That's when my camera died, and something warm slid down the back of my neck. The confessional had opened itself, and I wasn't alone. Episode 2. The whisper that tasted like ash. When I turned around, there was no one there, only the confessional, wide open, and a trail of ash leading from his mouth, like a tongue dragging across the stone floor. Father Calder stood at the far end of the chapel, his face whiter than the altar cloth. "You should leave," he said, "tonight, before the second whisper finds you." I didn't move. I couldn't. Not because I was frowning with fear, but because I saw something inside the booth. Not a shadow this time, but carvings, words, thousands of them. Every inch of wood had been etched by a hand, not with a knife but with nails, human nails, bloody, cracked, and still embedded in the grooves. I stepped closer, and the first word I read stopped my breath. Forgiven, then another, forgotten, and under them all, forsaken. I ran my fingers across the grooves, and for a second, I saw something I cannot explain. My own reflection in the polished side of the wood. But my mouth was moving on its own, and I was whispering. I don't remember what I said, but Father Calder rushed over and slapped me so hard, it snapped me back. "You were repeating it," he shouted. "The child's confession. It lives in the wood. If you speak it, you invite it. And if you invite it," he looked at the altar, "you die in pieces. But your soul dies first." I tried to leave. I really did. But my footage me proof is still in the camera. So I stayed one more night, hiding in the back pew with the red light of my recorder flickering beside me. At 3:03 a.m., the candles lit again, and I swear, I saw Father Enoch walking the aisle, blindfolded, holding a child's drawing in his hands. It was of an angel, but the angel had no eyes, only mouths. Episode 3. The drawing that bled when touched. The next morning, I found the drawing lying on the altar. It hadn't been there the night before. I was sure of it, but there it was, faded crayon lines on yellow paper. An eyeless angel, his wings made of tongues, It's my carved wider than any child should know how to draw, and smeared across the bottom corner. Blood, fresh. I picked it up carefully, but the moment my fingers brushed the paper, it pulsed, just once like a heartbeat. A warm ripple spread from the paper into my palm and up my arm. I dropped it, blood soaked through the altar linen beneath it. Father Calder rushed in, his breathing uneven. He saw the drawing, saw me, and for the first time, I saw fear in his eyes. You touched it. He didn't ask. He knew. What is it? I demanded. It's what the boy gave Enoch, the moment of the sin, not just a memory, a relic. He told me that Enoch didn't just hear the sin try to carry it, contain it, lock it inside a sacrament. But sins that ancient don't stay buried. They rot, and when they rot, they grow teeth. That night, I tried to burn the drawing. It didn't burn. Instead, it screamed. I threw it into the church well behind the chapel, and that's when the whisper returned it from the booth, not from the walls but from inside my own thoughts. You tried to bury me. Again, the chapel bells rang by themselves, and I saw Father Enoch staring at me from the confessional, eyes gouged, smite wide, holding the drawing, still wet. Episode 4, the psalm that never appeared in any Bible. I couldn't sleep, not after that. The image of Father Enoch's hollow face lingered behind my eyelids, like a smudge burned into my corneas. I played the footage back frame by frame. The confessional was empty, the drawing gone, even the blood on the altar linen had vanished. Check the hymn book, Calder whispered, emerging from the shadows as if summoned. He was paler than before, a rosary wound around his wrist like barbed wire. What hymn? I asked. Psalm 67. No, 6 to 7, not a real psalm. That's the point. He handed me a leather-bound hymnal so aged it coughed dust. Inside, between pages 112 and 113, was a handwritten page. 18 read. The penmanship was wild, like it had been written in the dark by someone whose hands didn't belong to them. He who forgives what heaven cannot shall be chained by the weight of silence. Below it, a crude drawing of Father Enoch with no mouth, just a stitched X. The boy recited this before he confessed. Calder murmured, said it was whispered to him in the garden by the angel with mouths. That it wasn't a prayer, it was a key. A chill snapped through my spine. That night, I dreamt of the chapel, but it was submerged, underwater, and floating toward me was the confessional dripping, decayed, and open. Inside, not Enoch, me, mouth sewn shut, eyes wide, hands clasping the drawing. When I awoke, my lips were bleeding and carved into my thigh like a child had done it with a nail. 6-7A. I confronted Calder, screamed at him, demanded truth. He didn't flinch. Enoch thought he could absorb the sin by silence, but silence only echoes. Now it's echoing through you. I locked myself in my rental car, tried to drive. The GPS wouldn't function. The road looped, and the radio, it played only one sound, a whisper, played backward. He gave the sin a home, now the house once more. I slammed the brakes, and there, in the headlights, the drawing hung to a tree, still wet. Episode 5, the candle that burned without fire. I didn't sleep that night. I Saturday in the car with the doors locked, eyes on the tree where the drawing fluttered in the breeze, somehow untouched by dew or decay. At dawn, the paper was gone, as if the wind had stolen it, or something else. I returned to the chapel. Father Calder was already inside, circling the altar with a censer. His chain broken, his smoke cold. What does it want from me? I asked. He didn't look at me. Not you. Your memory. He motioned toward the pews. I Saturday. He placed a candle on the floor before, measured, colorless, wickless, and then he said something that still knots my stomach when I remember it. If it lights, you're already dying. I laughed, out of fear, not disbelief. And then the candle lit. No flame, no smoke, just a soft glow from within the wax, like something trying to claw out from the inside. I stood up so fast the pew behind me cracked. The chapel moaned like the wood itself was warning me. Calder stepped back. You saw the angel, didn't you? Only in dreams. He shook his head. No, you saw it when you opened the confessional. The shape you thought was a shadow. It saw you. He handed me a small cassette recorder. Play this at exactly 3:03 tonight. In the booth, alone, No questions. Just play it. I took it, against my instincts, against my trembling hands. That night, I returned, the candle still glowing. I entered the booth, shut the door, pressed play. The tape was nothing but static. Then, a child's voice, soft, choked, "Bless me, Father, for I have sinned." I watched the angel peel open her eyes. She had none, so she used mine. Something moved in the other half of the booth. A rustle, a breath. I tried to open the door. It wouldn't budge. The candle outside exploded, and from the static, the voice returned. "The sin isn't mine anymore. It's yours." Episode 6. The mirror that refused his reflection. I woke on the chapel floor. I don't remember falling asleep or losing consciousness. All I remember is the silence thicker than stone and a single word etched into the wall of the confessional. My northeast. Father Calder was gone. The candle melted into nothing, no wax, just a dark smear, like something had bled out from the inside. I staggered to the sacristy, hoping to find Caldera, maybe just something that made sense. What I found instead was a mirror, an old one, bronze framed, spotted with age, hung crooked on the wall above the broken lavabo. But when I looked into it, I didn't see myself. The chapel appeared behind me in the glasses, but standing in my place was someone else. A man in a collar, robe soaked in ash, face gaunt and bruised. Father Enoch. He stared back at me with eyes full of silence. And then, he blinked. I stumbled back, knocked over a shelf. Glass shattered. The mirror didn't. I looked again. My own reflection had returned, but something was off. My eyes, they were weeping, not tears, ash. I turned around, and carved across the stone wall in long, jagged scratches were 6 words. Confess what he could not contain. I left the sacristy shaking, breathing hard, and heard the faintest weeping coming from the chapel. It wasn't a child. It was Calder, curled at the altar, holding a photo I hadn't seen before. It was burned at the edges, but clear in the center. 2 boys, standing in front of Saint Auriel's. One of them was Calder. The other was the child who confessed to Enoch. His name was Micah. Calder whispered without looking at me. He wasn't just a boy. He was my brother. It looked up, and his voice cracked like gold wood. And we both saw the angel. Episode 7. The sermon written in blood. Calder didn't speak again for hours. He just sat there, clutching the photo, whispering things I couldn't hear. The chapel grew colder. Even the candles refused to hold flame, flickering weakly as if afraid to breathe. By dusk, I found him in the pulpit where no one had preached since Father Enoch's final sermon. Calder stood over a bundle of old papers spread across the altar like a desecrated gospel. Micah wrote these, he said, voice flat. Before he died, my stomach nodded. I thought he gave his confession. He did? Calder nodded, but what he saw kept bleeding into his mind. He couldn't stop drawing it, writing it. It wasn't madness. It was transmission. He handed me a page, ink blotted, torn, a single line scrawled again and again. If his angels have mouths, they do not sing. And beneath the page, smudged in what I knew wasn't ink, was a sermon, unfinished, in a child's handwriting, a passage that shook me. And lo, he made a mouth in the heavens, and it did not praise, it devoured. Calder looked me in the eye. Micah died in the confessional, not physically, spiritually. Enoch tried to cleanse him, but that kind of sin, it doesn't want forgiveness. It wants replication. I stepped back. Why are you showing me this? He handed me a final patch blank, except for a wet thumbprint, because it's starting again. And this time, you were the one who heard it whisper. The wind outside screamed. The chapel door slammed shut, and in the back pew, something moved. A figure, small, barefoot, covered in ash. Micah. He opened his mouth, but there were no words, just pages unfolding from his throat. Episode 8. The choir that sang without tongues. The pages kept falling, one after another, soaked in something too thick to be ink. Micah's mouth never moved. He only stared at me, eyes empty, as if the soul behind them had long since been scraped out. Calder fell to his knees. Don't read them? He shouted. That's how it spreads. Through the voice, through the word. But it was too late. My eyes had already landed on a phrase, halfway down one of the parchment pages. Their hymns were screams folded into harmony. And then I heard it, a low hum, coming not from the chapel, but from beneath it, a vibration, a groan, like pipes full of breathless lungs. The floorboards trembled. Calder pulled me backward, toward the sacristy. "They're waking," he gasped. "Oh, the choir. Enoch sealed them under the chapel years ago. Not bodhisacos." Echoes of the scene that sang too loud. The humming grew louder. The pews shook. Crucifixes rattled. And from the floor beneath the altar, a hand burst through, blackened, withered, but moving. It gripped the air as if searching for a throat. Calder dragged me into the sacristy and slammed the door. "We have one night," he panted. "One night before they finish their hymn. If they do, every soul that's heard even a word of it becomes part of the choir." I looked down at my hands. They were trembling, but not with fear. They were humming, a deep, horrible resonance vibrating in my bones. And in the silence that followed, I realized something unforgivable. I was starting to remember the words. Episode 9, the bell that rang without a rope. At midnight, the bell rang. No one touched it. No hand pulled the frayed rope. And yet it tolled deep, slow, and hollow as if announcing a funeral not yet lived. Calder and I stood frowning in the sacristy. He gripped a crucifix so tightly, it left an imprint on his palm. "That sound," he said through clenched teeth, "isn't a warning. It's an invitation." "To what?" I whispered. "To join the hymn." The ground pulsed. With every chime of the bell, the humming inside my body grew stronger, no longer subtle, but rhythmic, almost joyful. Calder backed away from me. "You've been marked." I shook my head. "I didn't ask for this." "You listened," he said, "and in this place, that's all it takes." I clutched my temples, trying to silence the melody crawling through my skull. But then I heard a child's voice echo from the chapel. "Come see the angels sing." The doors of the sacristy opened by themselves. Smoke curled in from the hallway. Not smoke incense. Sweet, sickly, familiar. And in the center aisle stood Mike again, holding a bell of his own. He rang it, and the floor beneath the altar cracked open. A choir of eyeless children rose in unison. No mouths, no throats, but they sang inside me. Their voices were mine. I turned to Calder for help, but he had dropped to his knees. "Don't resist," he begged. "Just confess. Confess anything, your worst sin, before theirs becomes yours." But I couldn't, because the only sin I could remember was the song. Episode 10, the baptism of the unforgiven. That chapel went silent. Not quiet silent. Even the air stopped moving. The choir stood motionless beneath the altar's yawning moon, their heads tilted toward me like flowers starved of light. Then one stepped forward. Not Micah, Auriel. Her skin was gray, cracked like a dry riverbed, and around her neck hung a broken rosary, each bead blackened as if burned. She pointed to the font of holy water. It was full, but the water was red. Calder whispered, barely able to form the words. "That's not water. It's memory." A girl walked toward it, dipped her hand in, and wiped the liquid across her own face like a cross. Then she looked at me, and so did the others. One by one, they approached the font. One by one, they marked themselves in blood memory. Their ritual, their baptism, a baptism for the unforgiven. Michael was last. He didn't mark himself. He handed me the last drop cupped in his hands. "You must carry it," he said. He couldn't. That's why he sealed the booth. I fell to my knees. My head burned. My veins throbbed. The hymn tried to erupt from my throat but choked, tangled by my own disbelief. "Why me?" I croaked. Micah's smile was thin, broken. "Because you heard it and still stayed." And then the font cracked. The liquid inside screamed, and I saw what Enoch had seen. Not an angel, but the first hymn ever written. And it didn't praise. It condemned. Episode 11, the pulpit that breathed. The moment the font shattered, the chapel changed. The walls pulsed as if alive. The floor groaned like it was breathing beneath our feet. And at the center of it all stood the pulpit, unchanged, untouched, and yet exhaling. Calder grabbed my arm. "Don't listen," he hissed. "It's not a sermon. It's a sentence." But the pulpit called to me. With every breath it took, I felt mine shorten, as if the chapel was taking back air I hadn't borrowed, as if it wanted me closer. And then I heard Enoch's voice, not echoing through the church, but inside me. The word was not with God. It was God. and who wept because it had spoken it. The choir moved closer, their eyes empty, mouths stitched, but their bodies swayed left, right, left like waves drawn by some invisible sermon. I stepped toward the pulpit. Calder begged me not to. "You speak it aloud. That's how it returns. That's how the first priest died." But my feet moved anyway, and when I placed my hand on the pulpit, it inhaled my breath, my voice, my name, and then the book opened, a Bible but not one I'd ever seen. The pages were soaked in something dark, almost organic. The text blurred, shaking as if it refused to be read. Still, I saw one verse. It wasn't written in ink. It was scratched in, "Let the final priest speak, and may the world remember silence." The pulpit exhaled, and somewhere deep beneath the chapel, something began to knock. Episode 12, The Confession That Echoed Back. The knocking didn't stop. It grew louder, angrier, until the stones of the chapel ceiling trembled and small flakes of holy dust rained down like ash. The Bible on the pulpit slammed shut by itself, and the knocking stopped for a moment. Then, a voice spoke from beneath the floorboards. Not Calder, not Enoch, not Micah. It was my voice, repeating the verse I had just read. "Let the final priest speak, and may the world remember silence." Calder screamed and backed away. "It's in you now." The ground split open where the choir once rose, but this time, only one figure emerged in it. Eyes hollow, mouth sealed shut, fingers sewn with rosary beads, like someone had tried to bind his blessings inside his skin. He stumbled forward, holding out something wrapped in cloth. A collar. Mine. Micah stood at his side now. "Speak it," he said softly. "The chapel won't rest until the sin is named." I held the collar in my hands. Blood seeped through the cloth. My chest tightened. My throat clenched, but the words crawled up anyway. Not a confession, a memory. I saw the angel. I envied it. I asked to be touched, and it answered. The pulpit burst into flame. The chapel howled as if the building itself were being flayed. But the choir smiled, their mouths open for the first time, and they sang one final word. Remember. Episode 13, The Ash That Spoke My Name. When the word remember faded, so did the light. The flames from the pulpit didn't go out, they simply vanished. Like someone snuffed out a thought. The choir stood still, their mouths frowning open, soundless again, but the memory they sang had already buried itself inside me. Calder had collapsed. He was shaking, whispering prayers that didn't belong to any scripture I'd ever heard. Micah walked to me, not like a ghost this time, but like a Auriel, heavy-footed. He reached for my collar. "You wore it in another life," he said. "Now wear it in this one." I didn't resist. I took the cloth and slipped it around my neck. The moment it closed, the ground beneath my feet turned coldish cold, and from the stone below, letters began to rise, carved not by hand, but by memory itself. The final priest does not absolve, he remembers. Suddenly, the ash that had filled the chapel for days began to lift not as dust, but as voice. It swirled into words, into names, one by one, the names of every soul who had stepped into Saint Auriel since Enoch's silence. My name was last, spoken not aloud, but directly into my blood. I dropped to my knees, the ash entered my mouth, and I saw it all. The original sin, the boy's confession, the angel with mouths, and worst of all, the truth Enoch tried to seal. It was never just a confession. It was an inheritance. Episode 14, The Sermon No Angel Dare Listen To. I should have screamed. I should have run, but instead, I stood at the pulpit, the collar around my neck tightening and choking me, but claiming me. The memory that invaded my body wasn't fading. It was organizing. It's self-preparing. The Bible reopened on its own, but now the words were clear. They were mine, written in a hand I did not recognize, but somehow remembered. He who inherits the sin shall speak to him that ends the sky. Calder gasped from behind me, blood leaking from his ears. "You're the final voice," he whispered. "It's why I chose you." Micah stood beside the choir now, smiling faintly, almost lovingly. "You're not here to banish the memory," he said. "You're here to become it." I raised my hands, not of my own will. The chapel walls bled. The candles ignited without flame, and the pulpit began to breathe again, this time in rhythm with my lungs. I opened my mouth. The first note slipped free, not a sound, a presence. It rang through the walls, through time, through every name ever spoken within these stones. Outside, the sky blackened, and something ancient began to move beneath earth. The sin was no longer hiding. It was preaching through me. Episode 15. The silence that buried heaven. The ground cracked beneath me, but I didn't fall. I hovered weightless, lifted not by grace, but by guilt. The import from my chest like smoke, thick and wordless, curling around the rafters and crawling into the sky. And then, the sky answered, thunder without storm, light without fire, a soundless roar that pulled the stars downward. Calder screamed. He clawed at his ears, mouth wide, but no voice came out. The choir dropped to their knees. Michael looked up at me with wide, glassy eyes. It's begun, he said. I couldn't stop. The hymn kept unraveling, and I understood then this wasn't a curse. This was a reminder. The world had always known this sin. It simply chose to forget. I was only the vessel that dared remember. The chapel pulsed like a living wound. The Bible on the pulpit disintegrated into black feathers, and the last patch, only one that didn't burn, fluttered to my feet. One sentence. The first angel was not cast out. He walked out, carrying the word in his throat. The truth, not fallen, volunteered. I closed my mouth. The hymn ended, but the world didn't cheer. It exhaled. The sky cleared. The chapel collapsed, and in the rubble, I stood alone, still breathing, still remembering, no longer a priest, now a witness.